Death is something that's often painted over with nice words like passed away or moved along to the next life. The truth is that death isn't pretty. Death isn't anything that anybody wants to face. It's full of incontinence, discomfort, sleepiness, unalertness, people turning into people that they originally weren't. It's not fun and it's not good to watch. There's something that's been in the news recently called Death with Dignity. This is an act that was passed to allow people, under certain conditions, with certain guidelines to be followed, to request a certain amount of medication that they could take to end their own life on their own terms. This is something that I have always been a fan of. Recently, it was brought into the spotlight by a woman named Brittany Maynard. She's a 29-year-old woman who, after surgeries, after considering treatment, accepted the fact that she was terminally ill. She was diagnosed with brain cancer. Her surgeries included a partial craniotomy, which is a pretty big surgery, and a resection of part of her brain to try and stop the growth of the tumor. She truly did try and fight this battle before accepting that she was terminal. Once she realized that she researched into chemotherapy. The chemotherapy they were recommending involved full brain radiation. This would have left her with no hair and with first-degree burns on her head. See, she decided that was not the life for her. And I would have to agree. I probably would have made the same decision. She and her family then decided to uproot to Oregon, one of the places where death with dignity is legal. In doing so, it was a very expensive process that involved her husband leaving his job, establishing residency in Oregon, buying a new house, finding people to look after their pets, and establishing with new doctors. Hearing this diagnosis all over again. Essentially, she felt that it was worth it because she wanted to end her life on her own terms. She had looked into staying in hospice and decided that that also wasn't for her, as she had a very young, healthy body, and the only part of her that was dying was her brain, so it would have taken her quite a long time to pass away. In hospice, there's no recent data published, but in relatively recent history, in 2011, the average length of stay was 69.1 days. And just 1 year later, in 2012, the average length of stay was 71.8 days. This is approximately 2 to 3 months of your loved one suffering and living in this house just waiting to die. Brittany decided that wasn't for her either. Death with Dignity allows you to choose the day of your death, the time of your death, and the people that you're surrounded by at the time. Death with dignity is not suicide. Death with dignity is a way out for people who don't have control over the end of their life. It's only legal in 3 states, in Oregon, Washington, and Vermont. And there are very strict criteria that have to be verified by 2 physicians in order for somebody to be able to participate in this. You need to be at least 18 years old. You need to be a fully established resident of the state. You need to be competent and capable of making your own healthcare decisions. And you need to have less than 6 months to live. This being verified by 2 physicians helps prevent people who wish to simply commit suicide from convincing somebody that they're terminal when in fact they aren't. I feel that these are very well-established safeguards against this. In Oregon, the law was passed in 1997 and has been in effect for quite a while now. In Washington, it was passed in 2009, and Vermont very recently passed an act in 2013. People, unfortunately, oftentimes don't have the resources or the finances to uproot to one of these states to be able to partake in this. Thankfully, Brittany Maynard did, and she used her story to get word out that this was out there and that it should be legal in more states, and I completely agree with her. People against this act often refer to it as suicide or euthanasia. Euthanasia is something that the patient is not deciding on. The doctor is choosing when to end their life, and the doctor is administering medication. That is not what death with dignity is. This is not suicide. It is not somebody who is so depressed and so upset that they don't want to live anymore. Oftentimes, people who partake in death with dignity wish that they could live, but they are terminal. They are going to die within 6 months. They are going to go through pain, suffering, discomfort within 6 months. They simply want control over the one last thing in their life. Death with dignity allows you to enjoy every day up until your last. Death with dignity allows you to determine who's around you when you pass. Death with dignity is something that I am 100% in support of. Brittany Maynard was able to celebrate her husband's birthday, and she recently passed away in the beginning of November when she decided that it was her time. She was able to live all the way up until her last day, when she chose. She decided who was around her bed. She decided where she passed away. She decided when. She avoided the suffering of living in a hospice house for months on end. She avoided the suffering of trying to go on pain meds, trying to live on morphine, developing morphine-resistant pains, anything that would make her death very, very miserable. When my grandmother was in hospice care, the person the next door down often had his door open. He had been there for 5.5 months, just waiting to die. He hadn't been awake for quite a few months. He was simply alive because his heart was still beating. His family would come in and sit with him, but there wasn't much that they could do. They had already said their goodbyes, and essentially the man they knew was already dead. If this man had been able to partake in death with dignity, he could have enjoyed his final days with his family. His family wouldn't have had to sit next to an essentially dead man for months and months and months, waiting for him to pass away. Death with dignity is a very good choice for people to make. There are safeguards in place to prevent people who are depressed and people who are not psychologically capable of deciding this to use it, and there are safeguards in place to make sure that people truly are terminal before they choose this route. Brittany Maynard used her story and her life to bring this into the spotlight, and people should continue to discuss this, and I really hope that people make the correct decision in thinking about this as simply controlling the final part of your life instead of committing suicide. Thank you.